The reality is, as I've said over and over, and I'll continue to say, we are not solving our national debt problem unless we take a look at the very things no one on either side wants to take a look at. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, means-tested welfare programs. Those are the massive drivers of the American national debt. Elon Musk understands this, but trimming around the edges isn't going to do it. Right? Here is Elon Musk correctly citing one of the key phenomena that demonstrates the sort of underlying weakness of the American economic plan based on our spending. He says our interest payments are now outstripping what we pay for defense.
Our interest payments are higher than our Defense Department budget. That's I think was the real wake-up call for me, was looking at seeing that the interest payments on national debt exceeded the Defense Department budget. And that was only growing over time, which meant if we didn't do something about this, then there won't be any money for anything. We'll just be servicing debt.
And you know how to read an income statement, and you know how to read a balance sheet. You've had some business experience. I'm kidding, but
yeah,
you know about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, really, I just don't want America to go bankrupt.
Okay, that is correct. But Doge is not going to be capable of single-handedly doing all of that. And many of the moves that we are currently making, it's about to make it very difficult to raise more debt. Okay, and all of this is tied to what is the actual sort of overall Trump plan. And it takes a little while for the Trump doctrine to sort of take shape. Again, I have my idea of what the Trump doctrine is. That's very different from, say, Tucker Carlson's idea of what the Trump doctrine is. And President Trump doesn't really have a Trump doctrine. President Trump just has a series of what I think are very good political instincts and a fundamentally good set of principles, but that doesn't necessarily translate into something overall. But the way the markets are increasingly reading what President Trump is doing globally is that President Trump wants to reshore everything and he wants to withdraw from the world. And that is not going to have beneficial effects for the American consumer, the American producer, the American economy at large. And here I want to talk about the sort of problems that are going to arise from this vision. So there's a really good analyst. His name is Balaji Srinivasan, okay, who's an American entrepreneur and investor and a former general partner at Andreessen Horowitz. And he has a good tweet thread today explaining why it is that the world is perceiving some of the moves that the Trump administration is making as indicative of a broader worldview problem that could undermine sort of American strength. He says, here are 4 things MAGA is getting wrong and why it's handing over the world to China. 1, MAGA correctly understands that America's economic position is in decline, but think this is due to economic competition itself rather than lack of competitiveness. This is a big thing. Okay, he's right about this. The reason that America has been in relative decline versus China is not because the competitive global markets are bad. It's because America is not competitive in the American global markets. And Trump understands this, by the way. It's just sort of the other half of what he's doing with tariffs. Meaning, when he focuses on tax policy and regulatory policy, that makes America more competitive vis-a-vis other countries. Getting rid of competition entirely via tariffs, via cutting off world trade, via abandoning parts of the world is not likely to result in American victory. It results in American impoverishment. Second, he says, MAGA understands that the U.S. has wasted trillions abroad in foreign wars, but thinks the problem is global leadership itself rather than poor leadership. And again, this is a really important point. Obviously, the United States has involved itself, particularly in Iraq or Afghanistan, in wars that were either unwinnable or had such bad strategies attached to them that they became unwinnable. That does not mean that abandoning the globe to the predations of the Chinese, Russians, and Iranians is going to be beneficial to America, that is going to increase America's health in the world, economically or otherwise. We need to be concerted about how we use force and how we threaten to use force, but a world without America is a worse world, including for Americans. Third, MAGA knows their blue American enemies have allies abroad, but has incorrectly overreacted to this by treating every non-red American as an enemy. Okay, this is, I think, the point about Canada. Yes, it turns out that blue America took over the institutions of the United States. The left took over the major institutions, including things like USAID, and then they fostered abroad alliances with a bunch of people who actually don't like America very much. That does not mean that the United States does not have allies abroad who are worth cultivating and attacking places like Canada, for example. By the way, the attacks on Canada are likely to elevate blue American types to power in Canada. The person who just replaced Justin Trudeau as head of the Liberal Party is a Davos boy. He's a World Economic Forum guy, and he is now riding high in the polls thanks to this tariff war that we're having with Canada. And fourth, says Balaji, MAGA sees the billions of dollars flowing from the United States to foreign recipients, but isn't grasping that the U.S. can only print those dollars in the first place so long as it's the hub of a global empire. This is the point that I was making last week about the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Is that, yes, we fund a lot of places, and a lot of places fund our debt. That is just the reality. He says, basically, MAGA is hyper-focused on cutting off any apparent flow of funds from red Americans to blue Americans and non-Americans. They're trying to quickly shut off imports, close down institutions, and exit all wars. Except the reason imports exist in the first place is because the United States products are not competitive relative to other products or Fed printing. The reason those institutions exist is because the United States set them up to run the world. The reason those wars are happening is not because of American leadership per se, but because of the absence of good leadership by America. If you shut all of that down at once, you shut down American empire and with it the ability to print money, fund your debt, or anything like that. This is a correct analysis. And if the world perceives that as the program, it is not going to be beneficial to the markets. It's not going to be beneficial to American citizens. Again, this is not America needs to be the world's global police person involved in every single place. This is not America needs to trade with everybody at the same rate. This is if there is a generalized perception in the markets and across the world that America is withdrawing, that is not going to be beneficial for the United States because an American-led world order is better than a non-American-led world order. Beyond that, there are going to be some real downsides here in the United States. We need President Trump to succeed, particularly economically. We need him to succeed, particularly economically. This picture, I think, is going to be the story of the next 4 years, one way or another. This is a picture from the inauguration. You'll remember it because it was obviously a pretty famous picture. This is a picture of all of the tech bros arriving at the inauguration. And you can see it's Elon Musk. It is Sundar Pichai, who's the head of Alphabet. It's Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon. It's Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, Meta. Right? They were all there at the inauguration. They were flanking President Trump. And it was sort of an amazing moment because you had all these business leaders, many of whom were not, in fact, allied with President Trump over the course of his career here, who were at the inauguration. Now, the only downside to that is that if the economy sinks, what do you think is going to take the blame? What President Trump is doing right now with tariffs, that is not free market oriented. Tariffs are not free market oriented. They're a government control on imports and exports. That's what they are. They're effectively a tax on consumers. If the economy dips, the American people are going to perceive that business itself is to blame for what happens next. Regardless of the fact that many of the measures that are currently being taken by the sort of nationalist conservatives in terms of economics, measures like subsidies, new regulations in certain areas, tariffs, which are a form of regulation, that all of these sorts of battles really are not oriented toward free markets. They are more of a Bernie Sanders economic program in some ways than they are in a sort of traditional libertarian free market program. The perception of President Trump correctly is that he is a businessman and that he is capitalism oriented. If the economy sinks while he is president in a serious way where Americans turn against him, and again, he's underwater on the economy right now. If that happens, it is not just going to damage Trump, which would be terrible, and damage the Trump administration and the Republican future, which would be terrible. It is going to be used as a club against all of business, all of it. There will be a blowback against business, capitalism, and free markets, despite the fact that it wasn't business, capitalism, and free markets that brought us to this point. It was overweening government spending and then a bunch of pseudo-corrective measures that are attempting to be taken by the Trump administration in the form of autarkic reshoring. Okay, the sort of popular response is something that I've learned over the course of watching politics at a granular level for almost a quarter of a century. I've been doing this since I was 17. I'm currently 41. One of the things that I've noticed, and this is true for everybody in every industry, when you're in an industry and you know the ins and outs of a thing, when you know the details of the thing, you think everybody else knows the details of the thing. You think everybody else follows the ins and outs. That's not true. And let's say that you are Leonardo da Vinci and you're painting the Mona Lisa. You know where every single brush stroke went. You know the amount of effort it took in. What did people take away from the Mona Lisa for most people? They walk into the Louvre, they look at the Mona Lisa, they see it's a lady with no eyebrows, they kind of shrug and they walk away. That is most people. And the same thing is true in every industry. If you're an accountant, you know the ins and the outs of the tax laws. And so you figure maybe everybody else kind of has a general idea. The answer is no. They just know whether they're paying more or whether they're paying less. And when it comes to politics, I may know, or you as a listener to shows like this one, may know the ins and outs of global geopolitics and economics. You may follow this stuff at a closer level than 99% of the rest of America. Most people only see line go up, line go down. And if line goes down while President Trump is president, the blowback is going to be not just against tariff policy, it's going to be against business. It's going to be against capitalism. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.